Hi everyone, welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. This is Electric Hermit, reinvented to align with where we're at energetically. It's been about 6 months since I last sat down to do this, and in that time I've gone through my own very real process of confronting what's worth carrying forward and what needs to be left behind. That's exactly what the astrology has been asking all of us to do. As Uranus finishes its long transit in Taurus, we've been pushed to rethink our relationship to safety, value, comfort, and survival itself. It's been slow, stubborn, and even painful work, but necessary nonetheless. And now, with Uranus about to move into Gemini, we're standing at the threshold of a new era, one that demands that we rewire the mind and liberate the word. That's why I'm calling this next phase here the thought revolution. My aim with Electric Hermit isn't just to read cards or forecast trends. It's to create a space for real, reflective conversation about what these energies mean for us, personally and collectively. To explore how we can use these moments to transform our thinking, our language, and our choices. So today I want to welcome you back, reintroduce this space, and help set the tone for the journey ahead. Let's talk about the final lessons of Uranus in Taurus, the coming ingress into Gemini in, tomorrow when I'm recording this, and the power of what I will call the emptying breath, the waning moon phase we're in right now, leading up to the full moon in just a few days. So let's get into it. First of all, formatting wise, I'm experimenting, but right now, because I want to work more intentionally with my words and how I convey my thoughts, I am going to take myself off camera and focus on giving you the visuals of the cards to contemplate as we go through this. So think of it more as a podcast approach rather than a talk show. Before we dive deeper into the astrology, I want to share a little bit about what this process has looked like for me personally. Over the past 6 months or so, I've had to look hard at what I actually value and where my time and energy go, and how much of that is about meeting other people's expectations versus honoring my own. Very Taurian. And as I have a Taurus rising, the last 7 years have been truly transformative. Work has especially been a mirror of that for me, making me confront survival mode patterns that felt safe but actually kept me stuck. I have seen my own trauma wounding play out over and over again in power dynamics during this period of time, going through a visceral awakening in 2018, where I really came into alignment with a spiritual path and with the healing and esoteric arts, and put myself through a deep learning cycle that tested everything around my sense of self-worth, my sense of purpose, my sense of connection, the things that I need and the things that I don't need. And there have been truly electrifying moments of insight and also moments of virtual electrocution. Thank you, Uranus. I've also had to reflect on how these patterns show up in my personal relationships and where I overfunction, where I get drawn into other people's needs at the expense of my own. It's definitely not comfortable work, but it is clarifying. We've talked a lot about this over the years. If you have been on this journey with me, finding quiet boundaries, just having the courage to actually understand what a boundary is, and understanding that having a boundary, saying no, putting myself first, isn't selfish. It isn't negating of the value. of the relationship. It's about expecting to be met with the same frequency that I emit. Even my relationship with art has changed. Recently, I found myself returning to cinema not just for entertainment, but as a way of exploring ideas and psychology and culture. Music, too. It's not just background, it's not just dance workout soundtracks, it's a kind of teaching. For many years during this transit of Uranus in Taurus, I was not able to relate to the zeitgeist. I wasn't able to cull from the zeitgeist and from the vast records of creation the things that spoke to my soul. I found myself very internal, very focused on myself and my own shortcomings in creativity, and also where I could expand and find a sense of purpose and worth through that type of expression. And this channel has been a part of that and continues to be. But I've recently re-embraced that there is a deeper value in these art forms beyond the endless nonsensical drivel of remakes and reboots and superhero variations on the hero's journey that just reinforce the same dogmatic approach to our psychological evolution and our spiritual evolution. There are so many sources of inspiration out there of people who think outside of these bounds, but we have to look for them. And Uranus moving into Gemini is going to be a strong invitation into that. I've also spent a lot of time in deep reflection, some of it in conversation with trusted friends and some of it just with myself, trying to understand how to change these patterns instead of repeating them. And that's part of why I'm returning to this space, because I want to stay accountable to the work and I want to share that process with you. So let's talk about where we're at astrologically right now. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, shaking up our ideas about safety, stability, money, resources, even our relationship to our bodies and the earth itself. And it's forced us to confront stubborn patterns of comfort that may have actually been keeping us stuck. These last 6 months, this final stretch of Uranus in Taurus, have been like the last slow earthquake. The last chance to see what's truly sustainable and what isn't. I think that we've probably experienced this based on where these were taking place in our houses, around relationships and constructs within our home space, within our careers. Perhaps some very once visceral relationships have ended, or perhaps you've seen a radical change in some of your core relationships. Now Uranus is crossing into Gemini, and that's a major shift from earth to air and from body to the mind. Uranus in Gemini is going to revolutionize how we think, how we communicate, how we learn and move through the world. And it pushes us to question our assumptions, challenge our mental rigidity, and invite us to invent new ways of speaking and teaching and connecting. It's also going to be fast and unpredictable and sometimes polarizing, but ultimately it will liberate us if we approach it with curiosity instead of fear. And those fears are all about where we box ourselves in. Having spent all this time going through the revolution of the self, our identity, inevitably now we find ourselves confronted with the idea of how that translates to the mind and to how we externalize that. So what has been fearful in your life? What has held you back from being expressive of your true nature? Perhaps we've been stuck in the idea that the constructs around the material, our poverty consciousness, which came up so much during those years in our readings, how has that been transformed? probably through grief and through release, but an idea of perhaps accepting limitations around those ideas has ultimately led to a freedom that you haven't quite yet embraced. So this shift asks us to rewire the mind and liberate the word, and to question what we've taken for granted and imagine something radically new. Regarding the emptying breath, the current lunar cycle, I want to ground this moment in this energy. We're in what I'm calling the emptying breath, which is the waning moon phase leading us from the full moon to the next new moon. When you hear this, we won't quite have reached the full moon yet, but this is a longer term forecast or discussion of energy. So this is a total time of release and of shedding, of processing what we've finished so that we can make space for what's next. And it's the perfect metaphor for where we are astrologically too. So before we leap into the new mental revolution, we have to empty out the clutter, the old ideas and assumptions and the patterns that keep us small. Personalizing things and finding myself in constant battles around ideas of narcissism and empath dynamics and vulnerability versus victimhood and rescuing versus holding space for others. These have been very real issues that have come up for me. And I want you to think about this time as an invitation to slow down and reflect and consciously prepare for new intentions that you'll set at the new moon. Obviously, if you have any thoughts on that, I'd love it if you'd share in the comments. Going forth, it would be really great to gain more of a sense of community and mirroring to one another in this. I know it's hard because these are very internal structures, but as we move into this Uranus and Gemini energy, it's going to be necessary for us to reshape our communication and probably to move out of our cave back into the web of life and energy that we call the game that we're all playing. So I've pulled some cards, not as predictions, but as symbols, an invitation to reflect. And as I go through them, try to think about what these messages mean for you in the context of the emptying breath and the shift from Uranus in Taurus to Gemini. So looking at these energies, our actual tarot expressed a very real evolutionary process that makes perfect sense as you apply it to your own life. Again, we see here the first appearance of the Five of Pentacles as if to say goodbye to that, a defining element of Uranus in Taurus. And of course, not to ignore the shift into Pluto and Aquarius and Saturnian influences in Aries and so on and so forth. These are all very intense, pivotal aspects. Same thing with Neptune moving into Aries from Pisces. All of these things are so indicative of a complete shift of era. And we're not talking about a generational shift. We're talking about a radical shift in our values as a society and as individuals. So we have the Wheel of Fortune that specifically tells us that we are letting go of these old constructs around earth values of poverty and limitation. And of course, it is coming with this Uranian energy, the Tower. What could be more Uranian than the Tower? But again, let's not forget the Tower only presents externally when we are resistant to change. If we've been doing this inner work, if we are making the effort to better understand our journey, we will find that this is internal, that this is a revolution within, and one that is easy to integrate. Easy is perhaps not the right word, but without resistance, leaning into the flow, having the curiosity that defines Gemini, the expansiveness, the desire to grow and learn, we harness that Uranian energy internally as an inner revolution that projects us into a brand new experience of life, which in turn brings us into an understanding of our inner value as a Father of Pentacles or King of Pentacles. It's coming into the embodiment of power over our own value and our own worth, so that we can flow into the electricity of Uranus and Gemini. This is the symbol of the integration of the Taurian energy of Uranus in Taurus. We're a master of it now. How do we embrace that going into Empress energy? Fecundity, bountifulness, the embodiment of our worth that then in turn synergistically, naturally grows everything into a path of evolutionary upscaling, leveling up at a more rapid pace, that spiral that we've talked about so many times. There's an acceleration point once we leave behind our poverty consciousness and the constructs that hold us in shadow, that hold us in our unevolved, unexalted inner struggles, because that's all they are at the end of the day. We project those through our mirrors. So be very conscientious of your choice of mirrors at this time in life. Are they reflecting something back to you that you want to expand upon? Or are they reflecting something back to you that holds you in this narrow construct of falling back into the inner child, having the upper hand, out of nurturance, a lack of nurturance, I should say. Of course, what we see, these are transitional energies that I pulled here from another deck so that we would have more of an insight into how these transitions have happened. You know, this Five of Pentacles to the Wheel of Fortune, this pivot of a radical shift, is driven by the Lovers, which is a choice of love. As we've often said in perhaps more limited language, the Lovers represents gravitating towards what we love. If we are in the embodiment of this energy that we talked about here, the Father of Pentacles and the Empress, we only gravitate towards what we love, because we are love. We embody that, striving to thrive. We cannot make the wrong choice when we're in the Lover's energy. So this is also pivotal in letting go of this poverty mentality with this Wheel of Fortune energy, this radical shifting into a new dynamism. Now, where we have a problem here, because we always do, right, is that the transition from the Wheel of Fortune energy into this inner revolution of the Tower, it's made foggy by the Seven of Swords, the feeling that we need to conceal this, that we still feel on some level the remnants of this poverty consciousness in the way that we show up towards others. Can we show up empowered and not embattled, not combative, not feeling as though our ego is constantly being threatened, but instead to show up as, I am a vessel of a massive inner revolution that is going to bring change that is beneficial to my life and to those around me, because it's imbued with love. I don't need to hide that anymore either. I don't need to do this clandestinely. I don't need to feel the separateness. Moving from the inner revolution to that embodiment of self-worth, we have the Two of Pentacles, which is, again, a little bit of an uncomfortable transition, because what we see is a representation of this choice here, but again, in a perhaps more Neanderthal, more unevolved state of being, because what it represents is that in order to get there, we have to go through a unexalted temperance phase, where we perhaps haven't had the mastery to imbue it with the spiritedness of enlightenment, and so instead we're doing it more from the perspective of juggling to see how we can make these new choices and decisions fit in our lives. And that can be a slow process because we're always trying to pivot between how much we give to others, how much we give to our jobs, how much we give to our personal space, how much we give to our friendships and relationships as opposed to ourself. This would be that temperance process in the Two of Pentacles. And then more explosively and more radically on the horizon, what we have is how do we move from the embodiment of self-worth into the embodiment of wealth and abundance. And that's not necessarily material in nature. Of course, it would make sense that we have built the material foundations of enough. It doesn't mean being a billionaire. It means we know what enough is, so that we can always pivot from a place of having enough to take the risks and make the choices that can potentially give us more. That's what that is. And so what we have here is a very dense explanation of that energy, moving from expectation, the Three of Wands, into newness, complete radical reinvention of the goals, the path ahead, hitting the reset button consciously, letting go, the Death card, of what no longer serves us, into rebirth. It's not even a conscious process. It just is flowing with this energy. It is embodiment in this energy that we are all experiencing. And of course, buffered by the Strength card, shown here with a very Frida Kahlo looking figure that to me evokes the power of the mind. Think of Frida Kahlo's story and what she overcame while still revolutionarily creating her vision. One that has lasted the test of a century as a fundamental visual construct within our ideas of creativity and art. From Osho, these were the underlying archetypal energies that I put as foundational. So, this is the fighting card, which is the Knight of Swords in the traditional tarot deck. So here, what we are compelled to do is to let go of this energy. This is letting go of the armor, what limits us, what keeps us contained by the fear of risking pain, suffering, loss. It's all around the ego in this case. It's all around releasing the idea of past hurt. Because everything that we experience out of alignment comes from our mind looking for examples of confirmation bias in order for us to continue moving on the path in the same way, in a circular way, to re-experience the same things over and over again, only worse. This is the trauma response. This is, again, something that Uranus in Taurus forced us into understanding and confronting. So now, of course, we're at the very beginning of it, but with that Gemini energy, we have to use our minds in new ways. We have to be unencumbered by these old stories. We've had plenty of time to drop them. We have to move forward in our radical truth, owning it, but imbuing it with a sense of innovation, joy, and hope. Where we see the limitations around this tower and our abundance energy, it's all interwoven because the projections card is, once again, it's an emotional reflex in the Seven of Cups to essentially be overwhelmed by the narrative that is on display for us, because these projections force us into a constant mirroring cycle that limits the capacity for freedom. Again, another very Gemini Uranian theme. How do you get out of your own way in order to feel free to create new experiences? You have to drop the projections. You have to drop the prejudice. You have to drop the expectations. And inevitably, how could you go wrong in this reading? This Fool, Death, Strength card with the Empress being explained through the notion of transformation, which again is the embodiment of Uranus in Gemini. Transformation. Transformation as communication. Transformation as creation. Transformation as the empowered mind. For our Spirit Animal Oracle card for the next 2 weeks of this lunar cycle, and as the introduction into this Uranus in Gemini energy, we have Starfish Spirit, number 59. And let's read the Oracle message. Open to infinite possibility. Stretched out on the beach, the starfish opens fully to the rays of the sun, to the power of potential. As you look out toward the horizon, do you open up to infinite possibility? Spirit is the source of opportunities beyond your wildest imagination and ensures endless possibilities are available. At this time, Starfish Spirit urges you to stretch past the limits of your everyday perception and comfort zone, to dream of bigger things and imagine with even greater hope and faith, for miraculous potential is shining down on you. Feel it, bask in it, and open yourself to be filled with inspiration. This is a very fortunate sign that Starfish Spirit has come to remind you of your infinite potential. And inspiration, potential, infinity, these are also all very strong Gemini aspects that work perfectly in alignment with the Uranian shifts. So, as we close today's conversation, I want to offer this as more than just a reading or forecast. I hope it feels like an invitation to do this work with intention. This summer is going to be its own threshold. Uranus entering Gemini isn't a single moment. It's an era that asks us to examine, question, and liberate our thinking. Over the next few months here on Electric Hermit, we'll keep returning to these themes, and we'll explore how the astrology can guide us, but also how our own reflections and choices can reshape our reality. I want this space to be a kind of touchstone for anyone who wants to do that work consciously, who wants to stay awake to possibility, even in the discomfort of change. So if this resonates with you, and you haven't already, I hope you'll subscribe, follow along, and be part of the ongoing conversation. And thank you for spending this time with me. And I hope to see you in the next video. And until then, please do take care of yourselves, stay curious, and stay open. This is Electric Hermit, and this is the Thought Revolution. Namaste.